Hey, welcome everybody. This is your boy Davis over at the CFG, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the What Do You Think spoiler cast. So basically, it's a bunch of geeks and nerds talking about games, cartoons, anime, what have you, on and just do a breakdown of a series or whatnot of anything in the pop culture fandom. And we have a special treat for you this time. I know this has been over a decade in the making, and we are going to be doing a spoiler cast of a series that just recently have an official Netflix re-release live action series, but it is definitely holds a place dear in everyone's heart. I am talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and who I can't think of anybody else to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender than the one of my friend Stevie. Man, she is a hardcore Avatar fan. So and like the second one I said, hey, we're gonna do an episode of this because we need to do an episode of this. She was like, I want to be the front runner of this. And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna be in your way. You can do whatever you want on this episode, Stevie. But so how are you doing, Stevie?
I am excellent and I am so ready to talk about this. It's one of those things where when you're just like you know so much about one subject that just like people are kind of interested in, and then like someone's like, oh yeah, I remember watching that show as a kid, and then you just like verbally assault them for the next like 45 minutes about all of the information because you're just so excited to share it with someone. So
Mm-hmm.
when someone actually says, hey, do you want to do that like intentionally, I'm so honored to be here and to be talking about this because there is literally nothing I like talking about more than this subject. So
Man, you even like traveled all the way to California just for the concert. Well,
yes, which is such a funny story because when they announced that the Avatar Symphony was going to be happening, they went to like a couple places all around the world, right? They went to a couple places in Australia, a couple places in the UK, and they only had two stops in America. One was in Brooklyn, New York, and then one was in San Francisco. And the San Francisco one, I believe, was the last one that they did on the tour. And so I went to that. I made sure I was going to be there. It was beautiful, and because it was the last one on tour, both of the creators were there. Jeanette Barney, who plays Korra, was there. Dante Bosco, who plays Zuko, was there, and also, of course, the original composer of Jeremy Zuckerman was there. So it was truly a magical experience, and I felt like I was like this special person to be there. And then like 6 months later, less than 6 months later, like 4 months later, that they announced that they are literally doing an American tour, and then they are stopping literally everywhere. They're stopping. The one of the symphonies that they are doing is down the street from my apartment right now, and I felt a
wow.
little jaded to hear that.
Wow. Are you going to go again?
I have been thinking about it. I'm not quite sure yet, but
Well, like out of curiosity, was it just Avatar, or was that also a mix of Korra as well?
no, it was just Avatar. Yeah, or well,
Uh,
just yeah, Aang series. Yeah,
yeah. Okay. Cool. Man. Well, I mean, hey, like I said, like I'm not surprised that I mean, they did kind of cheat you in saying that this was going to be the last American tour, and then immediately afterwards, they just said, no, we're just going to go everywhere in the U.S.
yeah,
It's
and
like,
you know what? I want them to get that bag because the more that Avatar Studios makes money doing this stuff, is more money that's going to go into the production of the several movies they have going on, of the new show that they've got going on, of the books that are also coming out, the comic books that they are creating. They have really worked hard to build this Avatar universe. We've seen, if you follow everything Avatar related, which that's my job. Don't expect anyone else to do that. But by 2025, we will know pretty much the whole story of 9 different avatars, which I think is just a really cool universe to build around.
Yeah, that's true. That is very amazing. Very amazing. But the big, but I just have a feeling what happened was that it's possible. I think that like the Japanese, because the original composer was he Japanese, or was he local? Was he here in America?
He's
Or is
American, yeah.
okay.
I actually was just listening to an interview of it was Brian. No, it wasn't Brian. It was Michael DiMartino. An interview that he did, where they were talking about how they wanted, when they were originally coming up with the idea for um, Avatar: The Last Airbender, they were trying to figure out how they wanted it to be stylistically. And realistically, because they wanted it to be about martial arts, a huge part of their inspiration is through the films by the Shaw brothers, and in particular, if you ever want to watch a movie called The Eight Diagram Pole Fighter,
Mm-hmm.
those costumes in that movie are basically copy and pasted into the Avatar: The Last Airbender world. In particularly Aang's character, and a lot of like Zuko's character looks very similar to the villain. Um, and their fighting styles are also similar. And so that's kind of when they made the idea, because he said that Mike, when he was working on Invader Zim, that was a style that like the creator created, right? And so you had to learn like a brand new style of art to be able to animate for that. Whereas for Avatar, they wanted it something kind of easier to streamline, so to say, for their animators, because they're doing 2D animation. So if you draw one line, you're going to have to draw that one line thousands of times.
Right.
And so that's when they kind of were inspired to just say, like, well, let's try and do this, in an anime-esque style, right? Which at this point, I would venture to say no American animation studio was doing. And they really struggled actually finding a lot of the, because it turns out, because no American studio was doing it, American animators really weren't used to. So they
Yeah.
basically still had to relearn a whole new art style, which I just think is fascinating. That's a long way to say no, the person who composes the music is American, and but I think that he's one of the ultimate composers. Is I mean, I think that he would be up there as far as like Danny Elfman. Like, this guy is creating whole new genres of music, and I know that we'll get into Korra at some point, but like
Mm,
I'm not going to talk too much about Korra, I promise. But when he was creating the music for Korra, because they wanted this like 1920s style, but also this very Asian inspired music. So like he had to create a new genre of music for that show, which I think
mm.
is really just kind of beautiful all around.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. All right, well, I know that's a good long way of going into it, but let's get into it now. And before we do, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, this is going to be just season 1 of the of Avatar. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 3 seasons, right? It was only 3 seasons long.
3 seasons, yes, and I love that you bring that up, because I always like to say that season 1 is good, season 2 is great, and season 3 is an absolute masterpiece. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, the story progression of Aang's story was just was like brilliantly done, if I remember correct. Yeah, but like it just showed you like how it literally showed him growing up. I mean, essentially from
mhm.
to his responsibilities to becoming to becoming the Avatar and everything. And so I love that. But yeah, so but today we're just gonna be doing season 1. We're gonna do do the breakdowns. We're gonna talk about the awesome the cool stuff in it, and everything, like as always, discuss it amongst ourselves. But hey, if you do have an opinion on this, we love to want to hear your side of your opinion of this series too, as well. So by all means, like, share, comment, whatever, what have you, on our YouTube page, the CFG channel. We do read them. I would love to get y'all's take about what y'all think about Avatar season 1. So let's get into it, and I am going to give Stevie the keys to this one. So why don't you break it down for us?
Great. I am so happy to have the keys to this. And we see the Shaw Brothers influences right away from the very intro of this series, because that's when we're seeing the silhouettes of the 4 different benders, right? We're where they go through each earth, fire, water, air, right? And so I think I said it backwards. It doesn't matter. But those silhouettes are still like that's like their first thing of being like, you're gonna see a lot of Shaw Brothers references in here. But also something I really love about that intro is that it also shows the different types of martial arts that are used between the 4 different bending styles. And air is Bagua Zhang, and then we have earth, which is Hungar, and then water is Tai Chi, and then fire is Kung Fu, which I heard is kind of like a northern style of Kung Fu. Because Bajra Zhang, I'm so hard at pronouncing that one. They're both kind of fighting styles in Kung Fu that kind of, one's more of a northern fighting style, one's a southern fighting style, which I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff, the animation was so brilliant in my belief because they made sure that every single punch or kick or whatever that was done was 100% accurate to that martial arts style. And even I know we're only talking about season 1, but when we get into season 2 where there's Toph, she has a unique fighting style, but it's still in that earthbender form. It's just a specialized version. And so I really like when we get to see how much dedication that these creators had to honoring, even though they were, American, how much dedication and care they put into from their outside influences.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that overall, well, first off, I didn't know know that about the forms of the elements itself, but I mean, like, going into it, watching the first season of Avatar itself, what I loved about it is because I mean, you probably heard this hundreds of times. The people get this confused as this is an anime, this is a possible anime, and I think that's a good a good thing to have, because I mean the level of animation for a weekly TV series to be that strong for its time, because it's scary because looking this up right just now, that season 1, like the Avatar: The Last Airbender was introduced in 2005, which is crazy to me. So almost 20 years ago. That's wild. But like when what caught my eye was the animation, and then mixed with martial arts, because I mean I'm a dude, so of course I love martial arts. So yeah. So the biggest thing, and then the fact that they also have elements and specific powers for these things. Like I was already in caps, like totally interested in the world that they were creating into it as well. But what I also think which was a great start for me to kind of get into it, was that well, I guess at the time I didn't know, but now when I look back, it's like, it's pretty cool that they decided to make each season like a theme. Like each season, like it was like book 1, I believe it was book 1 was water, and then book 2 was wind. I'm assuming not wind, but earth. Thank you, earth. And then the last one was fire. And now they're doing this, so like they're just showing it showed his progression of learning the elements slowly throughout his his escapade. So book 1 was, you knew that he was focusing on one of the elements that he eventually gets to master. Gets to master, and then just see all the trials and tribulations that Aang and his crew and his gang to come across, to kind of finally say, okay, I did this. And then the path and the story to the end of the deal, to the season, was just freaking amazing. Like I don't even remember like a lull period. Like when how you have one of those filler episodes or something that it's like,
there are filler episodes though. I mean,
was there? Okay.
There's plenty of filler episodes, and the fandom often says that their one skip is the Great Divide, which is where they're like crossing like their version of the Grand Canyon, because it's just like it's a little much.
Was that in the first season? Oh, that was
in the first season.
Okay.
Yeah, it is in the first season. But I do think though that we are, again, what I like about this in the first season is like they're, because the all 3 seasons happen in 1 year of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first season is them like they are kids. They are still, it's like they kind of understand this responsibility. They understand like the next couple of steps that they have. But like truly they're just like kids bopping around, on a road trip basically, doing what silly kids do. And like while they're on their way to that, you see them slowly learning more about, like Katara, she can hardly move water at the beginning, right? And then like by the time that she gets to the Northern Water Tribe, she's already had a lot of skills because she has hand-to-hand fighting, combat experience at that point. Which I think is just all around really, really cool. That we do see them growing throughout the entire series. And I will say that why I think this season is good versus great to the other seasons is because I like the dark stuff. I like the nitty-gritty. And so and I think that if you're someone who really likes the joy and the fun that these characters have, then maybe the season would be the best season for you, because they're truly, there's a ton of lightheartedness, there's a ton of silliness, joking around. Even originally, Sokka's voice actor, Sokka was never meant to be this like funny, sarcastic character, but the actor himself was so funny through these takes that Sokka's personality essentially became his voice actor's personality, which I just think is a really cool progression too.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I totally agree. I like that. I like that they decided to go and implement his strengths within his role, and then they were able to pivot, the original idea, and then just to make him like, basically make that guy, him, like be himself, like right. Essentially be himself to do it. So, and then it made it I think it made it better because at that point there was way too many serious people inside that group. There was 2 serious people like that inside the group of 3.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know.
Well, and it really plays off of like, I feel like Katara's, kind of nagging nature, right? Mm-hmm. And then like, she takes everything a little too seriously. He takes everything a little too lighthearted, and it's just like I relate probably to Sokka the most in this season because he's just like, well, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna be making jokes the whole time, and I very much relate to that. That's how I cope with everything in my life. And so I really like someone who can just like laugh no matter how dark or how funny the situation is.
Right.
And then separate from Sokka, I also wanted to mention, just before we like really get into the details of the series or the show itself, is that the characters Iroh and Zuko, which Dante Bosco plays Zuko, and a gentleman named Mako played Iroh for the first season and a half before he unfortunately passed away. And I think he might have recorded it for all of season 2. I can't remember now.
I think he passed away at the end of season 2.
Yes, he did. I don't know if he got all of his lines in, but that's something worth looking up. But they had actually, because they were, Asian American actors at that time were pretty minimal. There wasn't a lot of work there for those types of people, or representation. And so because of that, Mako and Dante actually worked together as father and son in many projects prior to this one. And I think that really speaks also to the characters that we get here, that they're not just 2 actors, they're actually people who have really spent a lot of time together and was kind of like his, maybe not his father, but his elder in a lot of ways, and someone he always looked up to from a very young age. So I just think that that's a very sweet thing to think about when we're talking about these characters.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that like definitely like the you knew there was something a little bit more than just the them just reading the lines over over the deal, especially at the time, like you were saying, there wasn't a lot of representation in voice acting that early on. I mean, voice acting now has gone a long way from where it was like in the early 2000s and even prior. I mean, now. So I definitely love that. I did check this out though. I was trying to look at what the synopsis was for The Great Divide, and I do remember this episode. You're right. So it's like, Aang and his friends come to the rim of the giant canyon and must guide two rival groups of refugees across. It seems that this will be no easy task. And I'm like, oh god, this is another escort quest. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
so
it's definitely a side quest, and they don't even really use like any. There's no like bending in that really, and it's all around. I again just one of the more skippable episodes. That doesn't mean I also watched it with someone a few years ago who like every time I was like, this is kind of a throwaway. They'd be like, well, I really enjoyed that episode. So I think to each their own. And I think if you're watching it through the first time, you should watch it. Every episode.
Oh yeah.
I also just wanted to bring up too that something that I think was an ill-informed or could be considered a mistake is that Mike and Brian did cast a lot of white people to play very indigenous characters, which is something that everyone has kind of come out since and said that they would like to be different and would like to change. And a lot of the white voice actors that have come out, like that did like Cora and Mae Whitman, who did Katara, they have to come out and they just said that they will not play those characters again out of respect to the cultures, and that if there were to be like there's going to be a movie of Aang's gang or the gang as we like to call it. There's going to be a movie of that coming out in 2025, and Mae Whitman will not be returning very specifically. And I think that that's really awesome of them to provide such wonderful acting and life to these characters, but also know when it's time to step out.
Well, Janet Varney said she wasn't going to reprise her role as Cora because of that. Oh, I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
She
is still very much in the fandom. She is a huge she's actually just as big of a nerd as we all are. I'd say that Janet Varney and Dante Bosco, they run their own Avatar podcast, and so it's like they she obviously loves the universe. She loves her time as Korra, but she will not return. Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, let's get. Well, I kind of wanted to know, like, with you. So basically, the full. So just looking at the whole of book one, like, what was the core like underlining consistent story from the beginning of to the beginning of end of the first season of Avatar.
I think the biggest thing that we see is we've got our protagonist, that is Aang, and he's coming to terms with being the Avatar, which is something he never wanted. And then we have Zuko, who is trying to regain his honor. And so because of that, they're total foils of each other. Aang ran away from his destiny, and Zuko is trying desperately to get to his destiny, right? And so that's the biggest thing, is that we see them constantly having to work on, Zuko kind of has to let a lot of that stuff go, and more so Aang has to kind of get his stuff together, and really embrace who he's meant to be and his destiny. So I think that that's like probably the biggest theme that we see throughout the whole book of Water.
But do you really think that's what? But it felt like, if I remember correctly, book one wasn't necessarily him like trying to grasp to become it, but rather he knew that he had the responsibility. Because I mean, like if you never watched, well, obviously that's why if you haven't, then you're listening to this. But so what initially happens, what is that Aang? This is in the past. Aang is with his with the people in the Temple of the Wind with the fellow monks there. he knows he's the Avatar, but then he tries to escape his responsibility because he wasn't ready to acknowledge that he is the Avatar. So then I guess he gets in a situation where he gets stuck in an ice like do you remember well, how did he get stuck in the ice this iceberg?
Yeah, I mean there was a storm, and the storm caused him to, he was flying on Appa, which is his flying bison, and that caused him to they fell into these waters that were treacherous, and the Avatar state kicks in because the Avatar connection is all of the past avatars. So when you go into the Avatar state, that is the other avatars like basically taking over, like being like, you're not doing a good enough job at this, we're gonna do it. And so what they did is that the Avatar state put itself, for him to be frozen in an iceberg. And it wasn't until Sokka and Katara found him, because they were having a fight about sexism.
Right, but it was a matter of time. But like how big was the time skip though? Because the time skip had to have been
100 years.
Yeah, and then the rule of Avatar is that if the next Avatar will only happen when the previous Avatar dies. So essentially, the 100 years, since Aang is technically still alive, the world had no Avatar for 100 years, and because of that, the Fire Nation, who was probably the most aggressive nation, was the one that wanted to spread their empire to other places, and then they were pushing their power over it. So when they did that, they destroyed the Wind Temples, the Wind Temple monks, because they knew someone in the Wind Temple was the Avatar, and they wanted to nip it in the bud.
And so that's why. So they exterminated all of the Airbenders. That's why he's called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And then they also started once all of the air nomads were murdered. I don't think they would use that word, but gone.
Unalive. I know, right?
Then that's when they started on the water, because they assumed if they didn't find the Avatar, then they must have killed him, and he was reborn under the Water Nation, which is why when we get to Sokka and Katara's characters, she's the last waterbender of the Southern tribe, and the only reason why they haven't exterminated the Northern tribe is just because the Northern tribe is way too strong and way too big. But yeah, and the fact that we know that the only reason why she is the last waterbender there is because her mother Kaya said that she was the last waterbender instead, and so that's why her mother was murdered. And Katara saw it all happen in front of her eyes. So,
so very traumatizing.
Pretty big stuff.
Great.
Yeah, very traumatizing.
And mind you, this was a Nickelodeon show. But the biggest thing is, like, I mean, they just on the back end of that story, on the prologue of this, it just brings in once they introduce you to like episode 1 after all of this, and then they introduce you to Aang after they dethaw him after the sibling rivalry between I can't remember the name, Sokka and what's her name? I can't remember. Katara, thank you. It just like it was like, wow, okay, it's already heavy. Just a lot of stuff is on to just these kids essentially. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sokka is the oldest. He was probably in I would say 14 or 15. Then he's
about 15, 16, and then Katara's like 13, 14. 15.
Yeah,
and then Aang is 12.
Yeah, and Aang is 12. So Aang, who already was trying to run away from the irresponsibilities of being the Avatar 100 years ago, then finds out that everyone that he knows and loves is all dead, not even because of natural causes, mind you, because of the Fire Nation. And then you got Katara and Sokka, who's trying to get, Katara and those two were trying to get stronger essentially, because of what happened to their Southern tribe as well. And then also at the same time trying to get were they trying to get allies too? I can't remember. I don't remember.
No, not particularly. Their whole goal was to get to the northern their whole goal was to get to the Northern Water Temple so that Aang could learn water bending. That would be his next step. And you're supposed to learn in a cycle. So, if you're born in the Air Nation, you're supposed to learn air first, then water, then earth, and then fire last. And so you don't actually find this out until like in the novel books for Kyoshi. But if you don't learn it in the exact order you're supposed to, it can cause issues with your chi. And so that's kind of like something that can disrupt your ability to learn how to become a master of all of these elements. And something interesting is that Katara and Sokka's mom is dead, but also their father is gone. Sokka is the oldest man, boy. He's the oldest person of his gender in his tribe. And therefore, the responsibility of the tribe is all on him then. And he feels because his father was the leader of their tribe before going off to battle, that means that he's the leader of the tribe and he has to teach everybody, all the kids, like how to train. He has to be everyone's dad, basically. And something that I love about Sokka's character that I don't feel like is talked about enough is that Sokka actually, despite him not being a bender at all, he learns an enormous skill set in every single nation. So, obviously because of the water tribe, we already know that he's like learning to be a warrior, right? Like and a leader. And then later we see him in the Warriors of Kyoshi episode, which is episode 4. We see him learning Aikido with the Kyoshi warriors. So that's where he learns like hand-to-hand combat. And then when we get to the Northern Air Temple, where we find a bunch of people who are, living in an abandoned air temple, that's when he learns ingenuity and he learns how to invent with the inventor that's up there. And so I think that it's a wonderful thing that we see is that Sokka grows so much in this first season into what he's going to inevitably become. And I just think that's just really beautiful to watch him also master his skill set everywhere he goes.
Well, they actually did do a good amount of focus. I think that they did a pretty good amount of focus with his growth. I mean, because I don't remember if the warriors, the female warriors episode, was that in the first season or was that in the second?
Yep, that's the 4th episode. Yeah.
Okay, so the introduction to all of that was like, that when he learned from them, learned some stuff from them, then also learned stuff from the Northern tribe when they did reach the Northern tribe, and how he fell in love with the
I wouldn't even, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I wouldn't say that he learned from the Northern tribe. I think if anything, he brought, because of all of his experience within that first season, he brought a skill set that nobody had because he had firsthand experience of fighting firebenders. And when they like pull out, there's like a scene where they pull out all of these like Fire Nation suits of armor, and he's like, that's not what their suits of armor look like, because they were going to pretend to be Fire Nation to like get into the front lines. And he's like, that's not what they look like. And they go, well, these are real Fire Nation suits. He goes, when? From 100 years ago? And they're like, well, 84, but yeah. And so he's able to explain to them like how their plan is not going to work. And they're like, okay, well then we've got to figure out another way to figure out who the leader of this like Fire Nation attack is. He goes, oh, his name is Zhao. This is what he looks like. He has the skill set. He is actually bringing knowledge to the Northern Air Temple Northern Water Tribe that they didn't have. And so I think that this is actually where we see his leadership, that he actually is like, we see him throughout the entire series as this like silly little kid who's just like definitely kind of throwing his weight around. But like once we get there, like we see a lot. We see that he is actually a fully capable warrior.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I thought I've always thought that they kind of gave him a good enough advice. I mean, yeah. He could easily be He's definitely underrated. I will admit to that. But like, especially comparatively to like Aang and Katara and stuff. But I think overall, I think that when it comes like I guess overall what I was trying to get to was that like in the whole story in book 1, I don't think Aang fully accepts the true responsibility of becoming the Avatar, but it was it was still a work in progress, that like he knew what he had to do, and he was going, and then that's what he was going to do, you know. I mean, because of, you know, the loss of the air temple, and then as well of everyone that he loved, as well as he knew what, like, he was there. The reason why all this is happening was technically his fault, because he was gone for this, as so I'm assuming a little bit of survivor's guilt because of that though too.
I think that he has a huge amount of survivor's guilt, and you know, it isn't until we get to episode 7 and 8, which is a 2-part episode, where, you know, they're in this forest that has been damaged by firebenders, and then there's this spirit that's been attacking this village and taking people every night, and they're like, oh, you're the Avatar, do Avatar stuff. And he's like, I don't know what Avatar stuff is, you know. And so he is like, well, I'll do my best, like I have to try. And while he's doing this, he fails miserably, but he ends up accidentally going into the spirit world, which is then when he's able to learn more information about, you know, being with, you know, his what his inevitable Avatar duty is, and that's when he learns that he has to go to, you know, the Avatar Roku's temple to actually speak to Avatar Roku. And I also just want to point out too that monster that he is fighting against becomes his long-term spirit guide into the spirit world, which you see only one other time in the series, but we see it a couple of times in the comic books that continue on after the series ends. And so I just personally have a lot of love for the Spirit Heibai, because it's like it's his guide. They're tied from this episode forever. They're tied together.
You see him two times, and then you're hooked on this one, on that character.
Because it turns out that this is kind of an Avatar thing, is that they create a connection with one of the spirits, and then that spirit is kind of like there to be like, every time they go into the spirit world, it's like, hey man, I got you. You're my buddy from the outside, you know. And so I really like that connection that they share. But then when we get to Avatar Roku's temple is when we really see, you know, when he gets to talk to Roku, and like they have this long conversation about like, this is what, like, Roku tells him what the Fire Nation is going to do, and that's when he gets the deadline. You have to do this in 1 year from today. Everything has to be done in 1 year from today. And that's a lot of pressure. And I think up until we get to that episode 7, he's really kind of like fumbling through it. But then after episode 8, he's like, I have to do this now. This is my responsibility. I know what the plan is, you know. And so we, going forward, just kind of have to get it together.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, like, yeah. So I mean, that's why I really respect about the series itself, was just how like story progression made a lot of sense. Didn't take much, because it's at the end of the day, it's technically a kid's show, but still at the same time, it's the underlinings of a very intricate interweaved plot that made things to make sense, and then also allow you to grow and grow upon, you know. So that's why I definitely like when you see shows like that does that it holds a special place, you know, like, because
Definitely.
it's not like something that you just normally see and then be like, hey, you remember this when you were growing up? Like, oh yeah, I remember this, because some of it was basically I call it empty carbs, because that's all it really are.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So, but this is like starting episode 1, they went out the gate, and then it just improved, like, you know, because like, especially when it comes to seasons, when you long running seasons, then you get to that point where they jump the shark. It's like, no, they knew exactly what they were going to do, and that's you definitely got respect for this. So But yeah, but I mean, overall, besides the Great Divide, but I think that like overall the consistent of the story was definitely there. They saw like, you know, when they were running away from Zuko and Iroh, because a very angry Zuko, because he just hated life itself at this time, essentially. I just think that like the clear protagonist antagonist like angles were very evenly. I think they were very evenly done, and especially for an introductory season. So but what was like one of the did you have like a favorite like episode or anything like that you can come across? You don't have to pick one. I will make it easier for you yeah. But like, was there like a favorite angle that you saw in the first season that caught your eye more than the others?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I you know, as much as probably a cop out as it is, my favorite episode in the first season is the last episode, because what is so beautiful about that episode is that, you know, we see, because you know, the episodes leading, as soon as they get to the Northern Water Tribe, you know, they're struggling with the customs, you know, you know, Sokka's got this love interest, which is also another thing. Sokka learns a new skill set in every nation. Sokka pulls a girl in every single nation, which he's got it, man. But also Katara too. Katara also pulls quite a bit. You know, we've got Haru, you know, but and Jet. We have both Haru and Jet. So she has like two boyfriends.
I don't count Jet.
Like
I don't
in this
count
first
Jet.
season.
You can't count
Jet counts for her.
How?
Jet counts for her.
How? Because but Jet was deceptive. I mean, you couldn't really necessarily like believe if he really did or not. Well,
let me tell you, as someone who's dated men, that's not par for the course. But I also think that it's the Jet episode is a really beautiful way to show how much the Fire Nation has affected. And when we think about like you know, the way that war has happened in real world settings is that a lot of people's family members have died, and so like we see this like Lost Boys group of children who have learned that they have to do their own thing because all of their parents are dead. All of their parents are dead because of this war. Of course it would give you a deep-seated hate of the Fire Nation and everything that the Fire Nation has done. Whereas like we have Katara and Sokka who are, and Aang obviously, who are very, very reasonable people who like know the difference between a civilian and someone in the army or the navy or whatever, you know? And so that's where we see the big conflict, is that like Jet wants every person of the Fire Nation to be murdered the way that they would relentlessly kill everyone else, you know? But Sokka is able to distinguish these civilians are just people living their lives just like you and me, you know? And I do think that that's where we see the you know, kind of the 3D aspect of these characters, because yeah, they're not just like blindly like Fire Nation bad, you know, and they're willing to like look at, you know, people who are just civilians differently. And you know, Jet comes back and we see plenty about that, and we'll talk about that in book 2. But you know, I think that that's a really good way to distinguish our characters and what their goal means to them, and that they're not just here like they're here to, like, if they're going to be harmful, it's going to be intentional, and it's going to be for the greater good, and it's not going to just be maliciously across the board. And I do think that that's really good, and we see that again in the final episode when you know, Aang is coming back from the spirit world after getting his like enlightenment, and Zuko has stolen his body, and then, you know, they rescue Aang, and Zuko's like knocked out in the cold, and Aang goes, "We can't leave him out here." And they go, "Yes, we can." And he goes, "No, he will die." And like, while that would have been the end, story over, but it really it speaks to these characters' humanity, which I think is really beautiful. It's like, we're not going to do the cheapest shot we can do. And Aang is, meant to, he cannot take a life, right? Which, is questionable. We see a lot. He probably killed a lot of people that we just don't talk about.
We know he
did. We do. We absolutely do. But, I do think that that's a really beautiful thing, that they're not here to just, to just blanket destroy everybody. But then when, Aang comes back and Zhao, kills the moon spirit, which is huge. And we also see, again, Iroh, even though he is Fire Nation through and through, he is also, we've seen him throughout the series that he is actually very connected to the spirit world. He can see spirits just as well as Aang can. And we don't get into that until later seasons, but we see that he is actually a very enlightened individual, who is just kind of walking this line between good and evil. He's almost on the line of good and evil. And the second that
I don't really think that he's I don't know, Iroh in throughout the whole time was very interesting to me. I think he was on the, he was the voice of reason, I would say, on the for the part, how you have the angel and the devil on each shoulder.
Yeah.
He was clearly the angel for people in a situation where all they're wanting was death and destruction. Destruction. So I don't know if I would say Iroh is neutral per se. I would say, if anything, he is only doing this because of the way I feel like it's he was doing with what the cards were dealt with him because of his family. His dad, his brother was the ruler of the Fire Nation. His nephew he was basically babysitting his nephew for the whole time, because if he was on his own, oh my god, it would have been a disaster.
I gotta be honest, I kind of disagree with that sentiment, but only in the case of that Iroh was the heir to the throne.
Yeah,
he was supposed to be the Fire Lord. And we know in this season that his son died. And we know that the Fire Lord never cared for Zuko. We see that from the beginning to the very end. When Zuko's in that cave with Aang, at the end he says that my father says that my sister was born lucky, and he said I was lucky to be born. And that just gives us a huge picture of how little that he was thought of, even though he is supposed to be the next Fire Lord because his father's the Fire Lord. And Iroh relates to that, being outcast and being hurt, and he also has to mourn the loss of his son. And because of losing his son, he really takes on caring for Zuko as his own child. And I think that he, more than just being I can't let this kid be alone, I think he's this kid needs a father. He needs a real chance at someone teaching him how to navigate through all of these feelings and all, this kid has been given a shit deal, and I could change that for him.
Yeah, that makes sense. But at the same time, though, maybe because Iroh is probably, I would say, out of all the people in the Fire Nation, was the most empathetic person towards it. However, I'm saying I will say this though, but do you think now I don't know, maybe you may know because you read the books and stuff too. Was Iroh a completely different person when he was young, before the death of his son, or did he have the same kind of views that his brother did, or did he was he always empathetic?
There's a lot of conversation about this. He was a general of the Fire Nation and the heir to the throne.
Yeah.
He was a war criminal, let's be honest. He did atrocious, awful things that we don't see. We see him after the fact in his old age. He's kind of chubby. He's, kind of silly. We don't see the probably awful person he was. But the death of his son changed him so fundamentally that
It opened his
it
eyes.
it opened his eyes to the bigger picture, was because his son was fighting with him. Because they were fighting in Bossing Say, to break the wall of Bossing Say for 600 days, and until his son died, and then they say his son died, and then he just retreated and came home. Because how awful is that? Your only child dies, and this whole time you thought, like, we're doing this for the Fire Nation. Then you're like, what Fire Nation? The heir to the throne just died.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's what I was wondering, because like I was like, because if he was always this empathetic, but I can easily see a traumatized, like, a traumatic experience, like, seeing the death of his son would make him change his views, and then be like, okay, because like I was thinking, like, so what if he did get the throne? Who's to say that if he was going to be going through the same path as what the current emperor is doing? But like I don't know if I guess no one can really say, unless maybe the creator could, but but to confirm, like, oh no, he's always been that way, or whatnot. I mean,
Sure.
it makes more sense that he was traumatized, and especially since he ran away from his responsibilities, and now is like, I'm actually surprised he didn't get court-martialed or anything at this point. But it says like, oh, go look after Zuko,
Well,
and his run
we do learn in the third season what actually happened. He didn't step down from his duties; he was removed. But that's
Mm-hmm.
that's for another discussion.
Yes. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, if anyone, everyone loves Lyra. I don't know if anyone can say no to him because of it. Like, he was a very
No.
interesting character towards it. So I mean, like, one of my favorite episodes was also, well, I wouldn't say episode 20, but okay. So I'm trying to remember the last episode. I'm looking at the synopsis right now, episode 20, which was Siege to the North. Was that the one that Aang and Zuko had to escape? Like they had to cooperate to escape a situation, or was that? Am I thinking too far
No.
ahead? You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
you're
about?
thinking you're
Okay.
too far ahead. You're thinking about here, hold on. You're thinking about the Blue Spirit.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
And so, yeah, the Blue Spirit is when Admiral Zhao does well. This is when we see him become an admiral, because he is trying to get these like very skilled archers, because he can't ever seem to catch Aang. So he's trying to get these archers who can shoot extremely far away. So that way that he's able to disable the Avatar. And they are successful in being able to capture him. But then Zuko finds out that he is captured and says, well, if Zhao has him, then I have I have no redemption, right? And so that's when he disguises himself as the Blue Spirit and infiltrates their camp and their fortress, and steals him back. And this whole time, I find this episode very telling of Zuko's character, because throughout this, especially the first two seasons, he is just the embodiment of rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is just angry and trying to get what he is owed. And so all of this is like, if Zhao wins, he loses. And so he has to get the Avatar. And he was just capturing Aang so that he could have him himself. But at the end of that episode, when Aang saves him, because he saved Aang, because he could have, again, left him there, but he didn't. And, he says, like, when Zuko wakes up, he's like, one of my best friends was from the Fire Nation. And, like, maybe if this war wasn't happening, maybe we could have been friends. Do you think that? And then Zuko just immediately hits him with a giant fire blast, because he's like, no, I would murder you in any lifetime,
Yeah. Well, Zuko was looking for acceptance. I think that's why I've always thought that, like, because like it seemed like he had to be the one to get the Airbender to prove to his dad that he wasn't useless. At least
right.
that's the way I looked at it. I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah. So, but no, I definitely love I want to say the water bending, the Northern Tribe, water tribe arc. Was it like 2 or 3 episodes, or I think it was 2 episodes, right?
It was 3.
Oh, it was 3? Okay, so it was like 17.
Mm-hmm.
It was the last 3 episodes of the season. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, that whole arc to me, I think was really telling about the world itself. Even though the weird relationship that Zuko Sokka had with the leader of the Northern Air Temple was, or jeez, I said too.
The water
temple.
You're talking about UA. You're talking about UA.
Yeah, and then you see like why they were so why how organized and how crazy and strong, like how crazy the whole situation was. But like I think that encapsulated like the seriousness of like what like of where the situation was, because like at the end when they got sieged by the Fire Nation, when they not sieged, but when they were getting attacked directly, and how ballsy the Fire Nation was, because they thought that they can get away with it and stuff. It just shows like kind of shows the world is just kind of slowly decrepiting, like kind of crumbling down a little bit, because one of the biggest counteroffensives was the Northern Water Temple, and they went straight into it, and then he saw firsthand while all this was happening, and then to kind of switch a light to be like okay, this is what is needing to be done for the great the overall greater good of the world. So that's yeah. So I think like I said, there's series like cartoon series and stuff that can just that are there. They're fun at the time, but like that. But I think what really I guess I could ask you this while I do this, but like what captivated me about this series was the storytelling of this process. Was just so strong, for not only for its time, but like look at all the things. Like at first, it's a show that came out on Nickelodeon. No one knew what this show was when it first came out, and it just and still we're talking about 20 years later, even after a movie that we will not name, and then a season, and then the new season, a new Netflix series that just came out. It's just like it's still relevant. And like and it just amazes me like and this goes to show like, hey, if you set yourself into a good a series with a good plot and a direction and know what you're wanting out of it, you will be remembered. It will be remembered for forever, for a long period of time.
I think that the creators never even thought that it was going to be this big. They're just two nerds who wanted to make a good show. I don't think that they even knew that this was ever going to be, and I think that they're obviously very appreciative, but they, I thought that they, I get the impression that they really thought that this might just be like everything you were talking about with all those other series. I don't think that they really thought, and when they finished with Korra, like the immediate follow question is like, what's next? And they actually said that like, we're not really going to be involved with any continuations, just because like we've been doing this for 12 years. We would like to like
take a break,
do other things, yeah. And
then
they ended up being like, and then they were like, and then everyone ended up messing up every interpretation of it, and they're like, all right, we're coming back, but and I think that I think it is still that they are beautiful storytellers and animators, and that they really have a true understanding of, I think, a way to explain emotions and the human experience in a way that a lot of people maybe weren't getting from their parents or any like real adults in their life. And like you said, that Iroh having all of this empathy, and Aang has a lot of empathy too, where those were kind of some of my first examples of seeing empathy, ever. So.
Yeah, I mean, then when you really seriously think about it, I mean, like for a fact, the protagonist of this was supposed to be Aang, and then the sidekicks was going to be Katara and Sokka.
Zuko.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technically, you're right. Zuko does eventually. Yeah.
Well, hey, spoilers.
It's been 20 years. They gotta deal with it, but. Spoilers.
Yeah, if you don't know by now.
Spoilers on the spoiler cast. That's funny. But
how dare you?
Yeah, I know, right? So, like, I'm just saying that, like the amount of like backstory that is not only like implied, but is also shown and given to all these characters. I think, but I mean, besides some, like let's say Sokka, because like I said, Sokka kind of has the impression of being, you know, a chucklehead, you know, most of that kind of deal, you know, but in layers he's really more than that. He's the level of his responsibilities are a lot higher than what is given to him, but like there's just different kinds of layers on both sides of the protagonist and the antagonist sides. And what's even crazier is that in the first season the antagonist isn't really going to be the antagonist. It's like it just switches over towards to an even greater threat in less than 3 seasons.
I think that's one cool thing is that like it's like we think this is the bad guy. Oh wait, it's actually this bigger bad guy. Actually, there's this awful bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and we really keep in mind though too, like I mean, what's like how many episodes is Avatar? Like a total of maybe 60. Maybe 70 episodes total as a series.
It's close to 70.
Yeah, and they were able to do all of that in that short period. I mean, technically, it's a relatively short period of time. I mean, it's an
exquisite. It's a masterclass in storytelling for sure.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, that's why I'm just.
And that's also why it won a Peabody Award for character development.
Oh, it did win the Peabody. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like like you're right. Like when you're going into a show, get an animated series, especially on Nickelodeon or something, especially for that time. And you're not thinking, oh, we're going to tell the whole story. You're thinking, I hope this gets picked up for a second season, and if not, then if they wanted to pursue it even further, how like I'm assuming they would probably go to comics and stuff like that. But luckily, it was popular enough, and then they were also able enough to be able to tell the stories that they weren't able to tell on the animated screen into comics and graphic novels and things like that. So like, I mean, I'm just saying that like I would say that I just say that this game, like I love the series. I mean, knowing you love the series. I like the series. No, I can't.
I'm obsessed, honestly.
Yeah, I can't compare. I cannot compare it to your level at all whatsoever. But it is. It's definitely in the top 5 for me. Like it's like I just you can't think of anything bad about it unless your name rhymes with Shyamalan or whatever.
You shall not be named.
Yeah. So overall, man, like, yeah. I mean, I could watch. I haven't watched the season 1 again in a long time. I should. I'm well overdue to watch it again. I wish they had like commentary or something. 'Cause I would love to hear the directors and stuff on the back end.
I wish they would hire me to do it.
Oh man, I can just imagine that. Like,
I think there is a commentary if you have the Blu-ray set.
I don't. I need to.
Yeah,
though.
I don't either. Actually, I've been trying to get my hands on it, but
you know how hard, and this is why I really miss physical prints, because they don't make these things anymore.
They don't make the extras, Yeah. I mean, Netflix is cool, and I'm glad that they still show Avatar on there. But honestly, what makes it special is the special features,
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, but well, yeah, I know. Maybe, or also we grew up with physical print though too for me, because like when I tell my nephew, it's like
back in my day.
I'll be the guy with it's like, get off my lawn and give me my DVDs or my what's called the black HD Blu-rays or whatever. But anyway,
right?
Yeah, Lex. I'm sorry, Stevie. Thank you so much for stopping by. As always, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait till we talk about season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know you got a lot more and then some on it. And
I do.
For me personally, I have to say I think season 2 is my favorite out of the 3. 3.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, both season 2 is exquisite. So yeah, I understand why you would say that.
I'm not saying one is better than the other. I just think I like two's overall, everything that was happening in 2. And one of my favorite characters are introduced in that one. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. But guys, if you liked this episode of of Avatar: The Last Airbender season 1 spoiler cast, definitely give us a like, follow us on the YouTube channel, the CFG channel, to not miss another episode on this. And also, once again, if tell us what you think about Avatar. How did you like it? What was the good and bad of it? We would love to hear from you. So once again, this is Davis and Stevie signing out. Y'all, take it easy.
Bye, guys.